How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? Let's talk about what's happening right now, which is a very interesting story. Very few people expected the House of Representatives to be able to pass this whole new healthcare plan. This nationalized healthcare program was in almost every poll, everywhere by anybody, comes out about maybe 1/3 of the American people are in favor of it, and it never comes even closer than 15 points behind the people who are against it. So if the majority of Americans basically can't stand it and can't even tolerate the thought of it. Older people are afraid it'll destroy Medicare. Other people are afraid that the taxes on everybody's going to go up to such an extent, and impositions are being made that are not even constitutional. The whole question of the constitutionality of imposing a plan on you so that if you don't want to buy it, you're fined or you're imprisoned, that's obviously totally unconstitutional. Since when it's like somebody telling you have to buy a shirt? If you don't buy a shirt, you're fined for not buying a shirt. Well, it's the same as not buying health care. That you catch a cold, you're fined if you don't buy a medicine. If you smoke a cigarette, you're fined if you buy the wrong package. You're told if you don't buy a chair, you're wrong because you don't have a place to sit, and you're fined for not having a chair. What if you're fined for not having a car? What if you're fined for not having an apartment? The whole thing is so stupid that you could be fined because you didn't buy something that somebody else decided you should have. You know how sick that is? If you try to commit suicide, if you try to jump off a building, you're not even fined and you're not in prison because you tried to commit suicide. But if you don't buy a healthcare program, you're fined or you might be put in jail. It's sick and stupid, and the people are against it, but somehow the House of Representatives voted for it. By how much? By 3 or 4 points, by 3 or 4 votes. You know why 3 or 4 votes? Because let's be honest about it. Because Nancy Pelosi, the leader of the House, together with the President of the United States, decided that one way or another they're going to get those extra 3, 4 points. And then you know what happened? Everybody predicted it'll never pass because they knew that the majority of the congressmen are against it, because they just saw what happened in New Jersey and Virginia, where everybody on the Democratic Party side got wiped out completely and practically destroyed. And the congressmen know that that could happen to them in the next election for voting for this. But the pressure came immediately from the president and Nancy Pelosi. The president made one of his resounding, fancy speeches that absolutely went nowhere, as most of his speeches do. They start with a fantastic point. Nobody remembers what it was, and every time he finishes the speech, nobody knows what he said. All they know is what was so brilliant. And Nancy Pelosi is just the opposite. Nobody listens to her at all, and when she talks, her mouth never opens, and nothing comes out of any significance. And when something does come out, it means nothing, and it goes nowhere because they're too busy watching her face being stretched, being pulled, being turned, being squeezed, and her mouth hardly moves, because if she moves her mouth, the whole face goes out of place, and the whole eyes start popping out from the wrong direction because the skin is so tight it can't keep her eyes in, it can't keep her mouth closed, and it can't keep her face in one position. And every time you see her, you don't know what she's going to look like because it depends on which kind of plastic surgery she had that week. Now, these 2 people decided that they're going to get those 2 extra votes. Any place else, it's called bribery. It's called bribery, but in presidential politics, it's called everything but bribery. It's called influence. It's called the pressure from the president to pleading and begging and cajoling. It had nothing to do with it. It had to do with bribery. So they'll build you a bridge where there's no river. They'll build you an airport where there's no planes. They'll build you a school where there's no children. They'll do something one way or another to influence you to vote in their direction. And they found 3 people who needed a bribery long enough. Now, everybody's so disgusting to call it a bribery. It would be a bribery any place else in the world but this case. Nobody wants it. The congressmen, if they were given a freedom of choice, would not have voted for it. The whole thing is a fake and a fraud. This is called a democracy, but it's a democracy every time except when a plan is made that a president wants. Then it's not a democracy, then it's a fraud, a bribery, a dictatorship, and fakery. And that's what we're living through right now. This is the worst example of the democratic process out of control. Do you want this? Is this the America you want? This president and his dreckjente there ought to be ashamed of themselves. This is Nancy Pelosi with her crooked mouth. Get a job that you could do instead of corruption on a full-time basis.